Good day, scholars. Here we are today with Balto of the Blue Dawn, Chapter 10, Packet Work. Today, in our reading, we have one vocabulary word, coincidence. A coincidence is something that is not planned or arranged, but might seem like it is. If you happen to, you go traveling and you're in, let's say you take a trip to London, and all of a sudden in London, you see one of your classmates and you think, wow, what a coincidence, right? It's not planned, it hasn't been arranged, but it might seem as though you planned to meet up there, right? Like, oh my gosh, what a coincidence to see you here, right? So it's not planned, it's not arranged, it happened by accident, but it could appear as though you planned to meet up, like schedule an appointment with each other. A coincidence. All right. So today we're reading chapter 10. This is the time to pause this video and click on the video to open and follow along with me reading chapter 10, or to listen to chapter 10 with someone in your family, or read it to yourself. Press pause right now until you're finished with chapter 10. All right, if you are continuing, you are finished listening to or reading chapter 10, and you are ready to continue on to the packet work. All right, readers, we are going to look at these 2 pages for our work on chapter 10 today. Pages 24 and 25 in your packet. It is just these 2 pages. One of the questions we're going to look at is this Venn diagram, right? Compare and contrast. Compare and contrast the setting of chapter 9 and the setting of chapter 10. So I'm going to give you a couple things to think about and pause, right? Pause and think about, and then we'll fill it in together. But if you're not familiar with a Venn diagram, right, comparing, right, how they are the same goes in the middle, right, where the circles overlap. Contrast is how they're different. So we're going to think of how something in chapter 9 is different than something in chapter 10 over here. So let's get started. Something first to think about. Where are they in chapter 9 and where are they in chapter 10? Think about that. All right, what did you think of? Did you remember that in chapter 9, right, they're in Alaska? In chapter 10, right, they're back in Pennsylvania. Oops, 2 N's in Pennsylvania. I almost misspelled that. All right. If we're going to add some additional details, right, to the setting, think about the weather in those 2 places and what we read that might help you with what the weather's like. Think about that for a moment. Press pause. Think about it. What could we write to describe the weather setting? All right, what did you come up with for that? In Alaska, did you think of it as being cold or frigid? Right, there was a blizzard. And then back in Pennsylvania, it is warm, right? We heard about them being back in their shorts, right? Not in their fur boots and coats and hats. They're back in shorts in warm weather. I have another one for you to contrast how these 2 are different from each other. Think for a moment about when, right? The setting is when the story takes place as well. Pause and think about that. Do you remember when it is in chapter 9 when they're in Alaska? Right? They're in the past. Maybe you got even more specific and remembered it was 1925. Right? And how about now in Pennsylvania? Right? It's the present, right? They're back in the present, which could be, right, 2021, possibly. But definitely, chapter 9 is in the past, chapter 10 is in the present. Now, this last one, I'm going to give you a little challenge. I want you to think for a minute about the setting, right? So, where they are, when they are, right? Can you think about something related to the setting that's the same in both chapters? Pause and think about that for a moment. Just give it a try. If you're having trouble coming up with something, it's okay. All right, here's what I thought of. Maybe you thought of something different, but something that's the same in both of them, that's part of the setting, is the treehouse. That's something I thought of. If you thought of something else for, right, comparing how they're alike or contrasting how they're different, put it down in your Venn diagram and then I'll see it when you submit your photo. And that might give me something then to add to mine. That'd be pretty exciting. All right. Then the other question we're going to look at is over here on page 25. We have 3 figurative language questions we're going to work on. Write the type of figurative language used in the following chapter 9 excerpts. So, is that supposed to be chapter 10, do you think? I think these are quotes from chapter 10. Very interesting. There's a mistake there. So, Jack felt warm, wonderfully warm. Warm, wonderfully warm. Right? Quite a few words that start with the same sound. Do you remember, just even from our work yesterday, which of those figurative languages relate to many words in a sentence starting with the same sound? Were you thinking alliteration? Right? Alliteration, remember, is when many words in a sentence, a phrase, start with the same sound. Right? Enid eats enchiladas every evening after 8. Right? Lots of sounds starting the same in that sentence, right? Alliteration. How about this one? The leaves rustled. Yep, yep. So I think the key to this one is rustled and yip and yip. Do a little thinking for a moment. Remember, this is pretty new. It's why we're working on it together, right? Figurative language can be very tricky, but how wonderful that third graders are working on or working with figurative language. So these are words that sound like the word, right? Rustled sounds like the sound of rustling, right? Rustle, like the rustling of leaves, the rustling of paper, right? And yip, yip sounds like yipping. Do you remember which of these figurative languages relates to words that sound like the sound the word is making, right? That's what an onomatopoeia is. Right? An onomatopoeia is a word right? That sounds like the word, right? Buzz, wish, creak, right? They sound like the word. The word sounds like the sound. All right, we have one more like that. The tiny dog had beautiful big brown eyes. Right? So it's not comparing the dog to anything, so not a simile or a metaphor, right? And it's not an exaggeration, right? Hyperbole is an exaggeration. I think the dog actually has eyes. I think we're supposed to notice, right? Beautiful, big, brown. Three great adjectives, right? They're all describing eyes. What kind of eyes? Beautiful. What kind of eyes? Big. What kind of eyes? Brown. Those are all adjectives, right? Telling what kind of eyes. But words again, where many of the or sentences where many of the words start with the same letter. Do you remember what that is? We just worked on it up here. Alliteration. Alliteration. All right. Now, readers, that gives you a little bit that you're going to work on yet. You have back here on page 24 a reflect question. Reading for details. There's a lot of great descriptions there to describe the Huskies. And then right over here, there's a mood question and a reflect question. Actually, bonus, we're going to look at this mood question. Which best describes the mood at the conclusion of the story? I actually could see this being either cheerful or mysterious. So you could circle one of those, or you could even circle both of them, right? It seems like it's cheerful because, well, they get a dog. They're pretty happy about that. It's pretty exciting. But it also is a little bit mysterious because, well, why is it a little bit mysterious, reader? Right, they're not really certain where the dog came from. They're starting to guess, right, that maybe it came from Merlin or Morgan, right, as a thank you for their work. So there's some mystery there, but there's also some cheerfulness because now they have a dog. Definitely not glum, but I could see either of those being acceptable. Circling them both would also be okay. So now, scholars, you just have two questions on page 24 and one question here on page 25. And then you want to make sure you submit photos of 24 and 25. That's your assignment. So remember, finishing your work for chapter 10 and submitting photos of page 24 and page 25. That is today's graded assignment. Thanks for joining me.